Welcome to Community Forum. My name is John Goliatino, and I'm your host this evening. With me this evening is our two council people from the 4th Ward, Tom Sadi, who's been there a number of terms. I forgot to ask him how long. It's been quite a few, 6 terms, I believe, and Peter Nero, his running mate. And they're going to be telling us what they've been up to during the last 2 years, and what they're talking about in the campaign, and a few other topics. So welcome to the show.
John, thank you very much for having us.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thanks, John.
Yeah, you're welcome. And starting with Tom, tell us a little bit about your background prior to going on the council, and then tell us how long you've been on the council.
Okay. Well, I was first elected in 1999 on the council, and can't believe that many years has gone by so quickly. Before that, I was involved with both with the Democratic Party as well as on various boards and commissions in Danbury, volunteering on campaigns and working at the state legislature. Then after graduating from law school, decided to take a shot at the council, was lucky enough to be elected by the residents of the 4th Ward, and it's been a privilege since then to represent them.
Yeah, longer than I thought, yes. 99 years goes by, huh?
Does go by fast.
Okay. Peter?
Did I ever tell you I hate to follow Tom?
Oh, okay.
But anyway,
Okay.
Actually, I have a business background, and so I took my business background in sales and marketing, and I also used my community service work, which was quite a bit, both in the way that I volunteer in my church, and I've also been a volunteer at Dorothy Day, and I've served on some other boards. I was on Connecticut Public Television as a volunteer directing that, and I've been on the Newman Board of Advisors, so I've done a lot of volunteer work in the community.
Okay, and then you've been on the council?
Yes, it'll be 2 years in November.
Okay.
So this is my first, I'm finishing up my first term here.
Okay, very good. What are some of the issues that you've been involved in the 4th Ward during this last 2-year period, that are continuation of issues from the last 2 years before? Because sometimes you have the same issues, and it takes 4 or 5 years before they're all done. Because being on there at one time myself. So go ahead.
I've dealt with a number of issues over the tenure of my service on the council, but Peter and I together in the last couple of years, some of the big issues we've had to deal with have had to do with land use and planning issues. Some ongoing issues and some that were a little bit shorter term. For example, the waste transfer station that we worked with residents to fight against on Plumtrees Road, the proposed construction of a sewage processing facility on Beaverbrook Road, other zone changes and special exception planning applications that would have harmed neighborhoods and we think reduced property values. But on the flip side, this is not all about saying no to things. Peter served on ad hoc committees, and I've worked with Peter and others, and we've supported smart development, businesses that are expanding and creating jobs, that are increasing our tax base, that are improving roads while they're doing that, and bringing up our property values rather than bringing them down. So on the land use side, that's been a big issue. I think a couple of other issues have obviously
Is that cleared up at this point in time, that that plant they wanted to put in down there?
The septic processing plant. There's still some ongoing issues there. The city, I serve on a committee that's reviewing a proposed ordinance to address that issue, as well as the planning and zoning department is working on the issue as well. I think another area that Peter and I focus on, and Peter is far too humble when it comes to his own actions on the council, is just general constituent service. Talking to the residents, trying to solve the problems, one person, one home, one street at a time. I know Peter can probably give you some anecdotes on some things that he has done, and even in this last hurricane and blackouts that people occurred, we're out there talking to residents, trying to help.
And I think, as Tom pointed out, we do try to take the issues as they come up one at a time. But the thing is, if you listen to the people that are out there, when they do come up and they do talk to you and address their concerns to you, this moving along to do an ordinance on the sewage treatment proposal. That ordinance came about, as I saw it unfold, because people had an issue with it. And that, to me, is what makes the process work so well, is if someone has a concern, they come to you, and you don't know what that's going to lead to have a greater impact on the whole city, on the whole community. So I think those are the things that we're always in tune. And I kind of watch Tom a lot because he's got a real sense as to where you can impact the situation and where you need to say, wait a minute, that's got to go in this direction. Because when I first started on the campaign trail, I wanted to solve everybody's problem.
Right.
And Tom was clever enough to say, Pete, you know, that's just going to bog you down, and we need to direct that and go in another direction. But those are the kinds of things. It's those kinds of
If
issues.
you have an issue like this, that there's 10 people, there might be 10 people in the room, but there might be 100 people behind them, as opposed to when you have one person in the room and there might only be 10 other people. You know, you can tell by the people that's showing up or calling about something. If you got 10, 20, you know it's like 10 times that number that have an issue, and now you're talking to some people.
And you need to be in tune to that to see where that's going to take you.
Yeah. So you've been very responsive on a number of occasions on that. What was another type of issue that generated a lot of heat? But mainly by telephone, right? You don't get a lot of snail mail.
No, not a lot of snail mail, but I don't want to say that in a pejorative way. We support the post office. And I'll tell you, speaking of the post office and mail, one thing where we've gotten a lot of calls and emails is the issue of keeping our downtown post office open.
Right.
You know, we've worked with the mayor's office, with Senator Blumenthal, who's been taking a lead on this issue. Another one that is really, a grassroots issue is it's education, but specifically one thing that came up was the issue of delayed and late buses, and students spending an inordinate amount of time on the buses trying to get to and from school and waiting at school, at Shelter Rock School in particular in our ward, for the buses to pick them up, and also South Street School. Peter and I met with parents, PTO members, and Principal Horn, and also asked for records from the Board of Education and busing regarding the schedules. And, there was an improvement. Now, whether or not we made the improvement happen or were part of the solution, working with parents, PTO, and the principal, I think is more the case. But a lot of it is empowering people. When Peter says he wanted to solve everyone's problem, and I said, well, wait a minute, we can't necessarily do that. We want to try, but you can't promise what you can't give. You can only promise to do as much as you can to try to help them.
Still, if it's a bus issue, there's 40 kids in a bus. The chances are, if one person is complaining,
there's a problem.
There's a problem.
And education, overcrowding in schools now. We have this issue of, I don't call it redistricting, but sort of backdoor redistricting, where students who live in, let's say, Shelter Rock School District,
they're going to be bused crossed
to another school because there's not enough room either in all-day kindergarten or third grade. Now, it's not a lot right now. It's about 10 or 11 students. But we've been working with PTO, with parents, with the principal to try to work on an issue and at least have an open process so everyone's involved. Well, Peter and I talk about this all the time. Politicians shouldn't be imposing a mandate necessarily. What we should be doing is listening to the people and trying to formulate a solution.
Right.
And I think that's what we try to do as a team.
I think too, John, is a lot of the issues, and I've watched Tom do this, and I've learned from him in this regard, is you may see something on the surface, like you say, okay, well, the bus is late. So what does that do? So that the kids have to play around or somebody has to watch them. But you have to scratch the surface a little bit deeper to find out what really is the impact of that bus being late. And there are other things. How does the school have to react to that? You can't have these kids just running everywhere. And what do you do with those issues? So a lot of times you say, oh, okay, well, it's simply a matter of doing this. Just get, whatever. But you got to really look at what the impact is on the surrounding elements, kind of thing. So,
there was another citywide issue.
Yeah, citywide issue that you got a lot of flack on in the 4th, also, right? Was the reserve.
Well, I wouldn't say a lot of flack, but actually support.
Oh, support.
Support.
Okay.
There was some flack, to use military term. And full and fair disclosure, I'm in the Army Reserve. Peter is a veteran of the Army National Guard.
Well, I didn't really want to bring it out that way.
Yeah, but none of us, we have no connection whatever to this current Reserve Center.
Yeah.
This was a constituent, not only a constituent issue, but, there was a lot of misinformation that originally had started to go out regarding the Reserve Center, that it would be an Army base, that there would be live fire exercises, that there would be,
Really?
airborne troopers dropping in by helicopter.
And some of them might stray over to the 4th Ward and drop into somebody's
Drop in by
backyard.
mistake in someone's backyard.
Okay.
Once that was all addressed, and we did get, I'd say, the Army should have been a little bit more understanding and having a public hearing early on.
Right.
They didn't, the Army's a big bureaucracy. It's hard to move them in different directions. But eventually they did. They got the information out. We worked together along with Congressman Murphy's office, and eventually the administration in Danbury agreed that it was a good idea and also worked on reducing it in size. The administration and Congressman Murphy's office worked on that, reducing it in size so we could still have the Army Reserve Center here, but not have the large impact that people believed it would have if it was in the upper parcel of Lee Farm. But, we were out, Pete and I, early on, supporting this issue, even when it wasn't necessarily the most popular, because it's one of those things where it's the right thing, security-wise, economically, it can help Danbury. It's a win-win overall. And once the information
you just didn't want to make it too big and too busy.
This is a good compromise. Compromise can sometimes get a bad name for itself, but in this case, it was a good compromise. It's a win-win, and we're proud to have supported it.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other issues that have come up?
Always a lot of issues.
Well,
well, let's put it this way. Some of the positive things you worked on, like the education budget and the police station was done, I guess that was the previous term that was completed.
That was done. I think, and Peter, jump in. With regard to education, it's been very tight funding. But there's been some chatter out there. But more than the actual dollars and cents right now is what we've tried to do is open up greater dialogue within the community, going to Board of Ed meetings, meeting with PTO and parents, really opening up lines of communication that I think haven't been there for a long time. The city and the Board of Ed and parents sort of operated somewhat independently of each other until now we've got this common issue of really tight funding. It's sort of forced us to come together, but that's a good thing.
Right.
Because we can talk with each other. We don't always agree, but we've opened the lines of communication.
And as Tom said, probably this would have been an issue that might have stayed just under the surface again for a while, just smoldering, until finances started to really put pressure on it.
Yeah, it was like an automatic in the past. It was like jump and how high, In other words, we need 8%. And it was like a case of, okay, do you get 8% or you get 6%? As opposed to the economy is so bad, you've got to make some solutions that don't impact the taxpayers when they're getting hit in more ways than one.
I find it interesting that we seem to all be in agreement as to what the community needs. You don't see anyone going out saying, we've got to get classroom size from 18 up to 50. Right? And nobody's saying, boy, the quality of life around here is just too good. We got to get it down. You don't hear that, right? But I think what happens is the path then changes because we see the obstacles different in trying to reach these objectives. And that's where I think the issues start to come up, is how you're going to get there. Do you bond? Don't you bond? Too much bonding? Not enough bonding. If you retire this bond, do you right away do another bond? So I think those are issues that we always have to stay on top of and watch.
But that keeps your debt level up. When
keeps my blood pressure up. I don't know about that.
No, I'm saying is that if you're as one bond retires, you put another bond on, you're always at the same debt level, and maybe the economic activity is not as resilient as it used to be because of all those jobs that haven't been created, so to speak.
John, you hit the nail on the head from the standpoint of borrowing.
Yeah.
Bonding is just another word for borrowing. We do it through bonds as a municipality,
right,
like the state does it and the federal government does. But just as the state and the federal government have been hit by these issues of debt, so is the city, just like the average taxpayer out there. And we have to be very careful with the limited tax dollars coming in to spend them wisely and to borrow wisely. That doesn't mean that a lot of the projects that this city or other cities have done aren't appropriate projects through bonding and spending. But I sort of compare it to a wish list versus necessities. And it's a good wish list. It's not a pie-in-the-sky wish list, but it's things you want to do that are good to do versus things you need to do. That's a big difference. And I think the focus needs to be, going forward, as I've argued for, especially in recent times as we've realized this problem of borrowing and spending, is to focus on the necessities. If we have to put off some of the wants to a little bit later without compromising our infrastructure and our education, maybe we should. New doors, windows, and certain types of software and solar panels and other things can be good things, but they're also sometimes a little speculative in how much we're actually going to save in that savings in 15 or 20 years. My argument would be, let's save that limited borrowing resource and that debt service that imposes tax obligations on you and me and Pete and everybody out there to when we can more afford it and focus those dollars on other infrastructure items. So those are things, a lot of things we're going to be debating, I think, and discussing over the next several years because, as Peter said, no one says, let's have more students in a class. No one says, things are too good, let's go backwards. People want more and want things to be better. It costs money, but if we do it wisely, conservatively, and I mean conservatively in a non-political sense, but from a money standpoint, I think
for example, like the debt.
Can do good things.
The bonds that were issued in the past was almost like every 4 years there would be some more bonds that were issued. If you just wait 4 years, now you can maybe do 50 solar panels or do a few additional things without increasing the debt. In fact, having the debt a little lower and still taking care of your minimal goals.
We're going to see our debt service peak over the next couple of years, and it's going to start to retire.
Right.
And so our debt service is going to come down if we don't have new bonding. But we need to look at that in conjunction with what our schools need from an infrastructure standpoint, as Peter was talking about, from classrooms to address overcrowding, and to project out 3, 5, 10 years from now what we'll need. So we're not at a crisis and having to borrow under the gun.
Right.
Let's project it out, and it's something that I think more people are having to do in your own lives, in your own home, and we have to do as government, as elected officials. We have to do it to survive and not to burden our taxpayers too much.
I think looking at the whole pie becomes more and more important. Seeing what the whole pie is before it hits you in the face, I think, is what the real issue is.
Yeah, because in the government you have the government side. You have the school side.
Right. You
have the pensions. You got your pension obligations that don't go away. And like the state, like Governor Malloy stated, they're at 44% funding. I think we're much better here in Danbury, but we got to keep it at a certain level. So you got all of those factors that come up in a budget. And I'm sorry I cut you off.
No,
Okay.
no, that's quite all right. I use the analogy when you're looking at a budget is, a man and wife decide they're going to fix up their house, and so the husband goes and he says to the wife, let's do paint and let's do the molding and let's do the floor, and they do all of that, and the wife agrees to everything, and then the husband says, let's put in a front door, and the wife agrees to that, and the husband says, well, we're going to get a rebate from the state. So now it sounds better, doesn't it? You're not going to have to foot the whole bill. And it's perfectly legitimate. There's nothing bad about it. But meanwhile, the car is starting to make noise. And you don't tell your wife that. You're holding it from her. I'm not saying that.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is you just, then all of a sudden.
It's a little noise.
Yeah, but then all of a sudden, you put all the money out, and your wife, and you say to your wife, honey, I went to the mechanic, and the car's going to cost $2,000. And she says, well, do we have the money? And you say, no. And she says, why don't you? And you say, well, you agreed to all of these things that I wanted to do.
With the house.
So now, yeah. See, so So that when, so I'm not saying that there's anything there that's not, being brought to the surface. But what I'm saying is, when I say look at the whole pie, those are the kinds of things that you have to see right up front, because you probably fix the car before you put the molding in your house. You know what I'm saying? So those are the issues. I mean, and when I look at things, I'm always trying to find out, okay, is that the whole picture, so that we don't have to go to the people of Danbury and say, okay, oh, by the way, John, we need another $12. Hey, Tom, we need another $8, that kind of thing. And again, I want to be very clear that I'm not saying that there's anything that's hidden in that. I'm saying you got to look, you got to somehow see that whole pie before it comes in and it gets you,
Sometimes there are those items that some of us not unanimously on the council, but people will approve. People like the idea of it. It's a nice thing that if the city funds it and purchases it, whether it's new windows or solar panels or some other upgrades, it could be software at times. But again, it's looking at the whole picture to see, do we need that right now? And I'll tell you, there's some things that I think were generally popular that I voted against funding or voted to decrease the funding for them because I felt we're biting off more than we can chew now. And even though they may sound popular now, the cost is going to prohibit us from doing things down the road or require us to raise taxes, to pay off debt, to pay for the infrastructure to support these new projects.
Even land purchases, they seem, this is what the city should be doing, but can we afford it now? Maybe we should hold off for 4 or 5 years on, extending those systematic environmental land purchases that we're doing there for a while.
It's a balancing act to protect our open space versus floating those bonds and incurring that debt. Even though the bonds have been approved, I think we have supported the open space initiatives because of the concern of overdevelopment, then overburdening our schools and our infrastructure, which is kind of what Peter's saying, looking at the whole picture. One anecdote I think is we look at budgets year by year by year. People hear the federal government talking about 10-year budgets. Why are they talking about a 10-year budget? They don't have control over that. Well, one reason to talk about multi-year budgets, not doing a budget multi-years, but seeing what this year's budget, what type of impact it will have over 2, 3, or 4 years, is so we get that big picture. What is our debt service going to be 5 years from now, and what are the schools going to need 5 years from now? And do those lines merge, or do they diverge from each other?
But there's a big difference between the federal government and the state and the local, and that is they can create money, and you guys can't.
We have to raise it.
It's required to you need to have the funds one way or the other to pay for
Danbury is very lucky.
Yeah.
We've been lucky economically. We have generally had responsive government as a whole. We mostly are volunteers, whether it's council, zoning, planning, listening to constituents. And the taxpayers are willing to pay in this town their fair share if they see something happening, they see results. We've had that going door to door. People say, look, I'm willing to pay my taxes. I just want to make sure that they're being utilized efficiently. It's not that people don't want to pay for services. They just want to make sure the services are provided efficiently.
Waste drives everybody crazy.
Sure.
Yeah.
Why not?
Yeah. Exactly.
It should.
So have there been some things that have been cut lately that they can cite that, well, this wasn't the best and way of using money, and it's been cut back that you could report, so that you would want to report, let's put it that way.
I think one of the big things was holding the line on raises. The state's been doing it for multiple years.
Right.
Holding the line on raises at the municipal level, getting it to happen more at the Board of Ed level. That's a huge amount of money.
Because they were having regular increases. I'm not going to put a number out there, and you probably don't want to put a number out there either, but a lot of those jobs are like automatic. Oh, yeah, we give a 4 to 6% increase a year. Well, nobody's getting 4 to 6. During this recession, those increases in the private sector went out the window. You're lucky you didn't go down 10% or 20%.
It's hard when we're going door to door and people are saying they don't have a job or their son or daughter doesn't have a job, but other people are getting raises. And it's not that teachers and public employees don't deserve the raises. They work hard.
Right.
The issue is, can we afford them now? People are deserving. That's not the question.
Yeah.
Can we afford it? When we can afford it, that's the time to do it. You don't raise salary and raise taxes when people are hurting economically out there, the tax-paying public.
Right.
That's when people need a little bit of a break, a little bit of a cushion.
That's good. Do you have a website?
Yes, we do.
Yeah, okay. Your website and
I need to put my glasses on. I need to put my glasses on to read it.
Your website and the best telephone number that people can reach you if they have any questions that they directly want to ask you.
Tom could have probably already done this because he doesn't need to put his glasses on.
I'm at 797-1797, and Pete's 792-1130, and Peter has our campaign website.
Okay.
It's www.sadi-nero2011.vpweb.com.
That's a long website.
Like
but,
that?
You might want to repeat that.
Hold the card
I
up.
lost you after the first 3 letters, so repeat that.
It is kind of long, but it's probably okay. You ready?
Okay.
www.sadi-nero2011.vpweb.com.
Okay.
How's that sound? Pretty good.
Very good. Now, you got 2 minutes left. A summary, maybe a
Peter?
minute apiece or something.
Yeah, we'll split it up.
I'm going to tell you, I'm going to try to squeeze this in really quickly. 2 years ago when I was campaigning with Tom, I would knock on doors and people would come to the door, and I would tell them my name is Peter Nero and I'm running for councilman. Anyway, and they weren't all that really impressed, but I would tell them I was running with Tom Sadi, and 3 times that I can remember, the very big impressions, people said, Tom Sadi, he helped me win. And I carried those 4 words for the last 2 years with me, because that was what motivated me to keep on top of issues. Because I think that's what every elected official should strive for, that when you say that person's name, they should come back with he or she helped me win, I think. But
Again,
Peter
Peter
my
has done
spiel.
yeoman's work over the last 2 years on constituent issues. That's our biggest, the biggest thing is responding as best we can to constituent questions, constituent issues, listening, and telling constituents how they can have their voice heard, whether it's at public hearings, at Board of Education meetings, at City Council meetings. We want people to be part of the process. They don't have to agree with everything we do or say, and sometimes we'll change our mind if we hear from the people and they explain to us why we should be doing something differently.
Right.
So make people part of the process, and I think we can all be winners in this and move our city forward.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you for coming on the show.
thanks, John.
so much, John. We really appreciate the time here.
You're welcome. And I want to thank the viewers for tuning in to Community Forum. Tune in next week, same time, same station, and we'll have another interesting program. Good night for now, and we'll see you then.